Welcome to the last session of today for Streaming Media Connect. I'm Eric Schumacher Rasmussen, the VP and editor of Streaming Media and the conference chair for Streaming Media Connect. We've had a great week of panels and presentations on everything from highly technical topics like encoding and ATSC 3.0 to more general strategy and business focused topics like live streaming and advertising, and the one we're about to have right now, a discussion of sports streaming. You'll note that we did not call this a sports and esports focused panel, which we have in the past, because we kind of realized that at this point, it's all sports. I even put on my my Milwaukee Brewers jersey, but I forgot that my new fancy webcam has got it zoomed in a little closer. But pitchers and catchers did report yesterday, so there is some light at the end of the tunnel for those of us in the colder climates, which unfortunately seems to be almost all of us right now. Next week, we've also got sessions. We've got workshops, deep dives into various encoding and transcoding and FFmpeg and using vMix and things like that with streaming media contributing editors Jan Ozer, Rob Reinhart, and Sean Lamb, as well as presentations from industry vendors. So be sure to check those out and see if there's anything on the calendar for next week that tickles your fancy. Before we jump in, I'd like to thank our Diamond sponsor, Limelight Networks, for sponsoring this entire week's worth of sessions and panels. And I would also like to thank the sponsor of this session, Intertrust Technologies, for joining us. And as I said, our panel is going to be talking about sports, traditional sports, esports, all of it, and how streamers can up their game, find new ways to engage viewers, and how social media-based sports creators can get their voices heard in the mix as well. We've got a really diverse mix of panelists here today, a real all-star lineup, and I will just let our moderator, Jeff Jacobs, take it away. Jeff, introduce yourself, and then our panelists will introduce themselves.
Greetings, and thank you, Eric. And Eric, once again, congratulations on Streaming Media putting together a couple of days of pretty interesting programming, and you guys always have such a diverse program, and you get people from all walks of life. Congratulations again. You guys have a terrific reach, and it always pays off. Today we have a terrific program. It's not based so much on live streaming during pandemics like so many of us have been listening to and heard about for the past couple of days, past few months, but more, how do we level up now? How do we level up? How do we up the ante? How do we up our sports streaming game? The reason I like this panel so much, it's a terrifically eclectic group. Like Eric said, we've got on it the innovator, the producer, we've got the protector, the technologist, and we've got the evangelist. So it's a really, really good group. I look forward to the next 45 minutes to an hour of some good chat. Before we begin, as Eric suggested, fellas, why don't we go around the horn, introduce yourself. I would also say I'm Jeff Jacobs. After years at NBC Sports, after years of MTV and Viacom, I'm now general manager of VEN, which of course is the Video Games Entertainment News Network. It's a long story. If you want to know more about it, Google it. But that's what I'm doing. It's good for me because we are the esports and gaming lifestyle and tournament play. So it's really a good place to park my skills for a few years. We'll see how it goes. So moving forward, let's go around the horn. Let's introduce ourselves. Let's start with Darcy. Maybe Darcy's frozen. Let's go with Jeff.
Hi, this is the other Jeff. This is Jeff Keithley. I'm the owner of Live Sports and the executive director here. We basically are live sports streaming. Have been in streaming since it began, literally in around 1998, 99. Started down the streaming path with some very old and very antique gear, as you would see it in today's standards. Now we're streaming in 4K and using robotic cameras that are taking us to a whole nother level, have been for the last few years. A distributed workflow through the cloud infrastructure that we built and maintain. Doing a lot of things in different sports and really enjoying this.
Cool. Ali?
Hi, everyone. This is Ali Hajjat. It's a pleasure to be on this panel. I am responsible for product marketing at Intertrust Technologies. Intertrust Technologies offers content protection and anti-piracy services for streaming platforms, generally for media entertainment. We have some of the largest streaming platforms that are using our multi-DRM cloud-based service, as well as our anti-piracy solutions. We offer also broadcast TV security for direct-to-TV content protection, as well as application shielding for streaming apps and services. So I'm excited about today's discussions.
Cool. Welcome. Magnus, where are
Yeah.
you and what time is it?
It's 9:30 in the evening, so it's not that bad. I'm Magnus Svensson, work at a company called iWin Technology based out of Stockholm, Sweden. We are media specialists or streaming specialists, all from strategic advice, technical advice, and all down to development. Myself, I work as a media solution specialist, working globally to support the media industry with technology expertise around streaming.
Cool. Welcome. And Darcy?
Okay, am I here now? I did discover earlier I was the oldest guy in the panel, so maybe my old guy brain kicked in. Spent 30 years in sports and entertainment, comms, and mostly sports streaming, live streaming up till about 8 years ago when I pivoted to gaming and competitive gaming, and now what they call esports. So hopefully we'll be able to give you guys some of the knowledge that I've accumulated over those years in this panel today.
Cool. Welcome. I think that's it. Hey, before we start getting real specific, Magnus, you're the evangelist, you're the theorier, you're the deep thinker, and you're also the one latest at night, so we may drop you. You want to give us a minute or two on what you see the streaming, the A+ level of streaming, what the environment is out there? You want to give us a little overview as to the streaming environment as you see it of late?
Absolutely, and I think needless to say in this panel and with this audience, the broadcast is moving and streaming sports is moving from broadcast into the streaming world. And it's more and more we'll see it's a streaming exclusive environment that we're moving into. And I think what we have done the last 1 or 2 years is actually moving away from mimicking a traditional broadcast into actually start leveraging the technology of streaming and actually building something that we'll be discussing today. We have seen a changed behavior. We have seen that mostly the younger audience is looking more at highlight clips, Snapchat type of things instead of watching the full games. We see interactivity coming with the esport community, because the esports is coming from a totally different end, coming in with chat interactivity and synchronization, and that brings the technology to some advanced technologies like low latency streaming. We need to get the devices in sync. Later on, we'll see 5G really exploding the market with extending the reach to you basically can have live sports streaming in low latency wherever you are in the world, and you will have things like sitting at the arena, watching highlights, watching the game, do some augmented reality on top of the streaming experience while sitting at the arena. But I think what we'll traverse during this panel a lot is the convergence between esports and sports, and what the traditional sport can learn from the esports interactivity and adapting to change. I also would like to mention the other technology advancement we see now with co-streaming, where you can actually take a sports feed and do some co-streaming, put that in a different environment with a different commentating or a totally different environment, like the traditional Twitch streamers bring the sports into their typical new environment, and by that getting new audiences to the sports.
That's a lot. Cool. Jeff, tell us about what you've been doing the past 6 to 9 months, not only how you've been developing workarounds and solutions during a pandemic, but also what you've been able to take advantage of to up the ante. And please also include, because we were talking the other day about the drone and the sim. I had mentioned to you, I watched Drone Sports 2-3 weeks ago on NBC, and it was all in a simulator. It was genius, probably a result of pandemic, but really, it was
Yes.
just live esports. Jeff, go.
One of my favorite projects in the last 6 months. We worked with the guys at Drone Racing League and built them out a complete production studio in the cloud. Everything's being ingested there. It's being controlled. It's being treated. It's multiple vMix machines along with the Sienna processing engine and the backbone, 2 engines actually running. And it just really turned out to be something that nobody thought it could be done. But we've been working, my company has actually been working in the cloud and working with the distributed workflow for years, well before the pandemic. When the pandemic hit, it was like, okay, so it's business as usual. This is normal for us. Working in our rooms, controlling cameras across the country, that's normal for us. So now as we just added more things to it, but with the DRL, it was just a really fun project to work with them. They sent out specific gear to the homes. They had a very nice camera set up, a very nice dedicated computer for each one of the players / pilots. And then they brought them all back in the simulation. The simulation, the players or pilots actually said that it was like it's so close to flying an actual racing drone. It just was like, we're just like normal now. And so they really got into it and really enjoyed it. And whenever we started talking about output, it's like, okay, where's this going to go? Because we all assumed, oh, just streaming. Oh, no, it's going to NBCSN. And then it was like, oh, well, we're going to be on the Peacock also. So that was a really big, I saw it as a huge shift that now a company as large as that, really considering all this workflow that's being done in the cloud and all the production in the cloud, they're considering that as an option. And it wasn't just an option, it was a complete solution. So I think overall, that was the biggest thing I saw change in the last six, 7 months for sure.
But at the end of the day, we're still streaming sports, call it esports, call it live sports, whatever you want. What have you done to up the ante? What have you done making improvements and all that?
For us, for sure, is definitely growing out to other sports. Kind of like what Magnus was saying, where things are the niche sports are getting play now. They're having more coverage because we can do it more effectively. So we can use and leverage the power of the cloud to produce things that are not the normal sports that you would only see a few or 5 or 6 normal sports online or on the air at all. Now we're seeing things like one of my clients is paddleball, platform tennis. These are things that would never see the light of day, but now there's 4,000 or 5,000 people watching it on a weekend, and you never would have thought that. So that's a big part that's changing for us, is getting into those other sports that never got coverage before.
Where are you distributing paddleball and that sort of thing? Just curious. I'm sure
currently right now it is going to more of the publicly available places like YouTube and just more of a general. They're not really monetizing it yet into the gaming spectra, but the biggest part of our business is professional tennis, and whenever we have professional tennis going, we are sending it overseas to the gaming companies over there that are basically doing betting and such on it. So that's starting to come back around. We're starting to get more and more into the ATP schedule. We're getting more dates, but that is where the majority of our content has been the last 8 or 9 years, has been going overseas. And then I guess you call it the public consumption, the feel-good stuff that everybody likes to see. Those people here in the U.S., we're not a big betting company or betting country, mostly because the laws prohibit it, but it's starting to pick back up, and I see more and more people are getting into that.
Interesting. Jeff, what have you been doing lately up there in Canada? I mean, Darcy, rather, what have you been doing up there in Canada that you're most impressed with yourself about?
Well, the country's in Canada. I'm in the beautiful desert of Arizona, but
I thought you were. The company's in Canada, but you're down.
So look, this last 8-year journey has really. Last year took probably 5 years of our future into 6 months.
Right.
And we've been really playing on that blurred line, the crossover of gaming and sports. And of course, we lean in heavily into the sports-oriented games. No doubt, we support Fortnite and Call of Duty and many of those other things. But we see that this you mentioned earlier. What are the innovations going on? Well, first of all, you've got this crossover of different audience in different places. Old people watching lean back experiences in sports, and 18 to 35-year-olds playing interactive experiences and leaning forward heavily, and doing 6 different things at the same time. So all these gamified experiences now are kind of converging in this, mushed up world between sports and esports. Data visualization is big for us. Automation of production workflows, making machines do people work. Not new to us. I mean, I did that back, 20 years ago with broadcast automation, but now it's real AI, and machines are doing the work. They understand what the numbers in a jersey are. They understand what a car looks like in a race. They understand what a goal is. And these machines can render these experiences and the data about those experiences in very interesting ways, like they are in games. And so I think just the pure convergence of data and the visualization of data and the video, whether it's a game or whether it's a real sport, is very interesting. And you saw lots of these examples during last year, but they've started to ramp up very heavily. The Super Bowl was very heavily oriented towards those kind of experiences. You can watch NFL games on Nickelodeon, which didn't even look like a game in some cases. So I think that, this convergence of game experiences and real experiences in sports is really where the interesting blurred lines are. And that's where we play heavily. We're trying to figure out everything that machines can do that humans used to do, because the scale is huge. I mean, in this company I'm in now, we did 19 million events in 5 years. Imagine doing that many live sports events. Back in the sports days, the best year was 28,000 events, and that was even a lot, and that was a lot of people. Now that we did 19 million with a little under 100 people. So it's really truly I think the innovations in gaming and sports and that convergence is really an interesting place to be.
Can you elaborate on some of your automated production systems that you mentioned? I'm wondering if some of those automated systems might be interesting to some people online, but also how they helped some of your productions up the ante and level up in terms of production and creative, what they enable you to do technologically to help up the ante.
Yeah, look, it's again machine-driven workflows, but the fact that the tools are in the cloud, we don't have master control, we don't roll trucks, everything's in a cloud. Everything that you expected to be in a truck before, or master control in a production facility, are tools you can get over the web or some other dedicated connection. And if you're working with, some of the real big tool providers like THU Communications, a good example, they have an entire portfolio of automated tools, and you can rent them. I don't have to build a master control. I don't have to roll trucks. I don't have to have people out in the field. I can do everything from kind of what we're doing now. I mean, I'm not saying Zoom's a production tool that's going to stand up against a live sports event, but they're very Zoom-like experiences. And then all the overlays that used to be in chyrons and massive amount of graphic CGI people, it's all machines driving that now. So it's really interesting to see all the big providers and network companies providing these edge things. Limelight's one of our sponsors here, so give them a shot. They're trying to figure out what you need at what time in providing the encoding infrastructure and other tools. And these marketplaces for tools and things are all out there, and you can even go get the graphics people on for $1 an hour offshore if you want. So it's really interesting to see all that coming together. And cloud's not just about the capacity of the network, it's about the features and capabilities of producing things in the network without all those things that burn gas and time in our worlds previously.
Man, you are lucky to be doing this at this time of day. Many of us are, obviously. It's so much fun. As a reminder, we'll be taking questions at maybe a little bit after the top of the hour. So log your questions into the Q&A. We'll go into it and ask your questions. Hey, Ali, moving forward, you're the security guy, but also the protectorant, but also the innovator. So many things couldn't be done without you looking over them or developing workflows, technology, engineering, or just good old-fashioned production workflows to protect people to be able to do what they want to do creatively, reach their production objectives. Ali, what have you been doing in the past 9 months that really has helped other producers up their ante, level up the level of their production for viewership and maybe monetization?
Yes, I think basically focusing on protecting live sports and esports and doing it so that you can do it with low latency streaming is important. We had a lot of piracy before pandemic, but actually piracy increased even more for live streaming during pandemic. And we have been focusing a lot on different techniques to enable live specific anti-piracy solutions. So whether it comes to protecting, again, a low latency multi-DRM solution where you have to reduce the time that it takes to encrypt the content or provide keys for live streams on the fly with the tight integration with the packagers and encoders, or whether it's about the new workflow to deliver DRM licenses to the devices in real time to manage the expectations that the consumers have. So again, everybody on the sports side, streaming side is comparing latency with the broadcast latency, and trying to shrinking it down to the same level has been the challenge. When we hear about CMAF with low latency, Apple HLS with low latency, and these are all pushing the boundaries into how we can do sports. But in order to do those securely, right, first is to, again, make sure the additional content protection workflow does not add any delay to the platform. And then on the other side, when you're trying to detect piracy, right, there's a specific metrics that you need to follow. For example, how do you parse all the pirated contents that are happening during a live big event and identify which one is coming from which source, right? Factors in terms of identifying the leaks from which subscriber is happening. Again, there's different levels of that. We can get into more details of that. Because again, the workflow for live streaming piracy is a little bit more challenging. In the past, obviously for SVOD services or videos, movies, right, there has been different watermarking techniques. But when it comes to adding like a technically protection of the content in live streaming, there are new challenges. And that has been some of our exciting, technologies we have been working on.
Can you give an example of a production that wanted to do something, but they were afraid to? So you were able to come in and utilize technology to enable them to grow their creative. And if you want, I would even talk about like gaming or esports tournament play that really needs some security and protections. And the reason I bring that up, even 10 years ago, when I was like producing some beach house something for MTV, and we did like a game where we stuck the keys to a Honda in the sand, and 6 contestants had to find them, but the lawyers were like, this has to be completely equal. So you can't have 1, 2, 3, 4, it has to be equal, otherwise we could get sued. Some kid had an advantage over another kid. This is just common sense broadcasting anyway. So my point is, in this new world of esports that carry such high purses, and you brought up latency. We can't have one of these conversations without the magic word of latency. I'm doing esports tournaments online. I've got teams in Berlin and Poland and Long Beach, California. So there could be a disadvantage to some of this. So putting it back to esports and maybe even gaming, is there anything you've done to utilize technology to help productions grow their sport, make for a better experience? Ali.
So I think one of the factors that should be considered here is about the attack surface, right? And the fact that basically on multiple platforms and specifically streaming apps, there is more pressure, more avenues for attackers to open up and attack the platform. So one of the new technologies have been actually really used is called application shielding or application protection. When you're using a streaming service, a streaming app, you need to not only protect the content itself, but protect the kind of the payments, the user information, all the factors that are useful, right? And they kind of can be ignored, right? So the application protection works in such a way that basically it enables, protection against reverse engineering. So some of the software platforms in the zero trust environment can easily be reverse engineered, and then people can dig in information from the payments and credit cards, as well as actually the keys that are used to protect either user informations, or even the content themselves. So that's one of the new technologies has been proven actually useful for increasing revenue. When it comes to eSports, I actually want to say another thing. Although a lot of services are free and like they might be offered online for free, but there are attackers or pirates that trying to re-stream those and try to get ad generated revenue, right? And so looking at kind of the workflows that like sports streaming platform have used with subscription based offering, as well as the whole workflow of DRM and anti-piracy embedded, that enables actually blocking some of these re-streaming challenges. And I mean, really attackers might go to just restream on social media and just get paid fees from, channels that actually have more viewers. So these are the things that we have been looking into, how we can enable to improve actually monetization and revenue for the esports service providers.
You got all the buzzwords in there. You got to, I'm checking off the buzzwords. Of course, latency is the new drinking game. You can't have a panel on any of these streaming conferences without discussing latency. So we try to take a drink every time you say it. Keeping this pattern on with gaming and esports and tournament play for purses, because for whatever reason, it's that much more nervousness. Jeff, what have you done in terms of, well, protecting the product for your clients regarding gaming and esports with big purses?
Well, we have to do our due diligence on site. We're very adamant about watching, and we're very particular because in our realm, especially professional tennis, it's been a challenge because there's so much at stake in the gaming side, the betting side. We want to do our part. We make sure that all the data is moving as fast as possible. We make sure that our streams are as reliable as possible and also going out with the minimum amount of latency as possible. So we're down to under 4 or 5 seconds in most applications. I can't go into particulars about what backhaul we're using because it's proprietary to my clients and such, but that is definitely something from the very beginning when we started down this path 9-10 years ago now with working with gaming companies, that it was a huge thing to worry about, and it's just gotten better as technology has gotten better also. But for the most part, Ali, I would love to get more input on some of the ways of protecting, because I see our streams go up, and it's crazy how fast they show up on a Russian site. Like, I will see people, hey, we're watching this, and their take is like, that's my graphics. That's my shot. I know where that is. And it's there. It's within a matter of minutes. And it just baffles me that it is as rampant. And they'll put their branding on top of it, and sometimes they'll just leave it just as we are. And they're doing it just for views, or they're doing it, some of it, they're embedding it illegally, but embedding it illegally to run their own betting side off of it too. So it is definitely a problem. We probably don't see it as much, like I said before, because the U.S. hasn't been that heavily involved as gaming and betting is overseas. But we definitely have to worry about this on an everyday basis pretty much when we're on tour.
Darcy, why don't we elaborate on what you've been doing with the same thing? Again, gaming, gamers, gambling. And I'd like to hear some more about world fastest gamer, sim racing, etc. What you've been doing.
Sure, I'll start tie it into what folks said previously. I mean, for us, it's KYC, know your customer. On the player side, there's nobody in our world that's playing for cash matches, doing skills-based stuff that we don't know. We have a really robust compliance process. That's the place where humans still exist, by the way. But there's a lot of data and information, and clearly we have ability to, again, KYC on a constant, basis. On the other side, where we're streaming, we actually use GPN. For that term it's a gaming private network. We use it for latency. We have a backbone that's very compliant in terms of packet encryption and delivery, and none of that stuff steps on what we have to do to deliver things on time for the different workflows. And gambling's the highest susceptible to latency, because after a certain period it doesn't matter, unless it's outcome based betting. But in all these microtransactions and things going on, it's all real time. So you really have to have real time delivery, and seconds and milliseconds in our world are precious. In terms of what you were talking about for World's Fastest Gamer, I mean, we'll give us a little plug. I mean, that is a perfect example of a crossover. We take mobile console, PC, and simulator, and combine them all in this trajectory, bringing gamers from the gaming world and making them into real racing drivers. So that's been going on it started as GT Academy, now it's called World's Fastest Gamer, and that's been going on for the better part of a decade. And we've learned a lot about all the things we just talked about: privacy, security, compliance, because there's a lot of people, and we get 6-7 million people starting this competition at the beginning of the year. And, at the end, somebody gets crowned and gets $1 million in a career in racing. A lot of people want to, be part of that, and they want to cheat to do that stuff, and they want to bring in their other things into the world that we don't want to be there. So we're constantly, the pressure's on across mobile networks and fixed networks and all places where these people come from. And when they get into a simulator, then I'll tell you, there's where latency really plays, because not only you're sitting in a real thing that feels like a car and acts like a car, but it's a device connected to the network, and you're competing against 39 other people that are somewhere else in the world, and everybody has to be on the same page. So latency is a big thing. So we got to be able to, bring them all into the same kind of window of latency. And then what we do is normalize them all. So there's no advantage on the technology side. If some of them have 30 and some of them 100 ping, and we put them all at 30 or at 100, sorry, the worst common denominator. We also can't have somebody at 200 even participating. So we actually are constantly looking at all the participants and making sure that normalization is applied. Then it's all about skill. There's no more advantages of network latency. There's no advantages of performance of your PC. You're all in the same playing field. And if you've ever played any of those games where latency plays, it's frustrating to get shot and you don't even know where the bullet came from, or get passed and knocked off the track in a car because you didn't see it coming. So those milliseconds in a 200-mile-an-hour car on a virtual track, it means as much as it does on a real track. And you lose it 2-3 seconds, you could jump off the track. Everybody passes, you don't know what's going on. So we've always looked at that, and we can't have those problems, because the customer service issues that you get when you start trying to play with, where's the game server, where are the players, can we get everybody on some common platform? If you don't deal with that at the core level of network and normalization and latency, the rest of everything you do is, I don't care how good the experience is and all the great overlays and graphics, it's off the table because you just created a shitstorm for the players with latency or not latency.
Darcy, is there anything that your company Above the Border has been doing that has helped up a client's sports streaming game, if you will, because as a result of pandemic programming? Are there any examples that you've provided a more engaging service or a better product for your clients as a byproduct of the pandemic workflows?
Oh, that's a tough question.
It's almost like saying, is the show better because people are on remote rather than in studio?
Oh, I think it is.
I could argue one could get better talent that way.
You can get better talent. You can work 24/7 because you can follow the sun with talent. Customer service too, so the back office. But in terms of production, yeah, we've always been believers in remote production, and last year just took 3-4 years of our future and put it into 6 months. I mean, we literally are all those races I just talked about. We were getting the odd placement on ESPN and these different places. We were the only game in town for 6 months. Of course, NASCAR and F1 and guys, our partners jumped in, which is great, but we would never have seen that take up on, 85 broadcast networks for sim racing. And so I'd say that, the sponsors were probably the best beneficiary of that, because they had nowhere to go to reach that audience. They're already trying to get to this younger audience who don't go to racetracks anymore. So mostly it was about helping the sponsors to reach those folks. And then, of course, what you said, bringing in the viewers and the fans into the experience and allowing them to have a, cheer remotely and virtually and having their face on the screen. It's really cool. It's that's what they expect. If you watch a Twitch stream, they're all in with each other, and there's, they're chatting on one side and they're playing on the other, and their faces somewhere else. That's all now happening on all the things we do. And I love the fact that you can just tune somebody in, some talent like, Juan Pablo Montoya is sitting down in his home in, somewhere in Colombia, and he's suddenly in the action. He's actually racing and talking and commentating you couldn't fly all the talent in the world do that before. So I think that's a great experience and is really creating some good opportunities for producers.
Magnus, we'll come to you in a second. It's funny what you're saying, and we've all experienced this. Everyone on this line, the pandemic has really sped up workflows that many of us were doing anyway already. Like, it's funny, like about 8 years ago, I was trying to get this one division, one channel digital workflows. They were still on HD cam, and the rest of the world was already on digital workflows. And the producers were referring to things as files, not tape, finally. But this one channel would not turn over and move to a file-based production workflow. And it was amazing. And then you may or may not recall this, like 8 years ago, maybe 10, there was like this tsunami in Japan, and Sony had sent memos around to everyone saying the HD cam factory is underwater and we will be 6 months delayed in HD cam stock. True story. And we would go back to the network and say, okay, guess what? You have to become file-based because there's no HD cam stock available. So it's funny how like forces of nature will accelerate certain technologies. Magnus, to you, my friend, gaming, but also gambling. Gambling is a source, is a byproduct of live sports streaming and sometimes content itself. You doing anything with gambling? And I think Darcy is, but you doing anything with gambling nowadays? And is there anything going on in your part of the world of technology and streaming that, again, people have utilized this odd time to up the ante and up the level of their streams?
I would say, coming back to, we have discussed a lot of latency, and it's quite funny that this phenomenon has been discussed for years. When Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon for the first time, that would broadcast back to Earth in 6 seconds. So that was possible that time, and we're still discussing on getting the latency down to seconds. And I think there are technologies to get the latency down enough for the different use cases. And you can use the CMA for the Apple low latency that Ali talked about, or proprietary versions. But I think in most cases, I think the synchronization is more important than the latency, that everybody is in sync with each other and sync with overlays, sync with statistics and sharing and whatever you have. So I think that has been something I've been working with a lot with customers to get the second screen experience, get the chat in sync with the broadcast, and latency can be solved in more or less complicated and costly ways. And I think the cloud vendors are coming in with latency solutions now that brings latency down pretty drastically to levels that anyone from home can start doing some quite low latency streaming from their homes. And like I said, with superstars can interact with the viewers. And I think the trend now is to do some what I mentioned before with co-streaming, that you'll take a sports broadcast feed, add your environment to it, add your commentators, add your celebrities talking to it, or wherever that fits into your world, and bring sports to a different environment than what it used to be. I think that is a trend that I think we'll see more of.
If you look at the Q&A, Bob has asked more questions about latency. Darcy gave a fine solution. Jeff, do you want to throw in your thoughts real fast? Because chances are, unless we've beaten this question to death yet. But Jeff, you want to just share with us your thoughts about Bob's question briefly?
Yeah, I was just reading it just to make sure I was synced up with him on that. So camera crew on site and director, producers, graphics, everybody else off site. 2 to 3 seconds is actually pretty long. In most of our workflows, we're well under a second. So it's just a matter of using the right process. So there's definitely sources of getting, whether it's using LiveView for backhaul or SRT, or depending on if you have to depend on cellular, there's LiveView, TVU, a multitude of different cellular bonding solutions now. But also SRT is probably one of the biggest things that came out and really just blew up during the pandemic, because it gave us a more reliable uplink stream to be able to get out to multiple people, multiple sources to be able to get out to multiple locations. And we're definitely leveraging a bit of SRT. WebRTC is also something which is effectively what we're using now with Zoom. WebRTC is also something we're using to reflect back multi-viewers and such. That is without a doubt acceptable enough. It may not be to broadcast standard just because WebRTC is a little funky about whether or not it wants to go full rate or not. And so got to work with that. But if you're just needing something for confidence for a commentator to follow along, that's one thing. You could definitely use WebRTC as a reflection back. So there's definitely tools, and there's others, just like Darcy mentioned, there's others out there that they're specifically building those backhaul solutions as more of a proprietary or as a managed service to be able to get the latency and everything low enough to be able to use. But in our applications, we're definitely under a second, and after just a little bit of adjustment, it's just second nature now. It really is. Same thing for our camera operators. At first, we were kind of worried about, was the latency going to be like? Now, the human brain is amazing. It just gets used to that little bit of latency. A couple of my guys are gamers, so when they get on the line and they see it and they're literally on the LAN with the system, they're like, "Oh wow, this is really fast." But I'm like, "Yeah, but you're on site. Of course it's going to be." But whenever they're across the country, they're following the director just the same. Whether I've got a guy in Fort Wayne, I've got a guy in Atlanta, and they're controlling cameras there in California, and it's just normal once you get used to that lower latency. But you just got to have the right tools in place. That's all. They do exist.
By the way, it's so funny. I've been very involved in esports more recently than ever before. It's funny you say you guys are gamers. I am finding that technicians like TDs, graphic artists, 3D animators, gamers, I'll just say this even though it's ridiculous, gamers make extremely excellent TDs, editors, 3D animators. They get it, and it's in their brain, and it's like they're trained from a young age.
Multitasking. They can multitask. Yeah. That's the key. They can do more. I personally can multitask really well, but I cannot move left and look right at the same time and shoot straight. I can't do it. But I can do one or the other. But the multitasking is what we're finding from them. That and the dexterity of being able to use those thumbs to do more than just up and down. They literally can add all those other fingers in, and it's pretty amazing to see them adapt.
If you're a successful gamer, you've had to train yourself on graphics to create some awareness of yourself, not just a stupid stream on Twitch, but something that looks cool and has graphics. And it's back to cloud. It's all online. So all those tools, they don't have to buy switchers, they don't have to buy master control pieces and all that stuff. They can get it all on some app or some web enabled capacity. That's created a whole layer of those folks. And by the way, they can also create games. Oddly enough, they're also great programmers. So I'd say 80% of our staff are gamers easily. And, and I even game, and I'm an old guy. So.
Fantastic. Allie, you're laughing at these guys. Is it because you think they're foolish or because you know something they don't know?
No. This is exciting, actually. I totally agree. I mean, I honestly have not been a big gamer in my life, but I see, my kid and like the younger generation going crazy at it. And it makes sense. And no, I'm laughing because I'm relating. It's cool.
Fun. Anything to add, Allie?
No. Again, from my angle, this is a big industry. It's going to grow more and more. We're talking about this now. eSport has been growing. Increasing number of people, surprising increasing number of people are looking at it, watching it these days. And I'm sure it's going to grow significantly much more. So again, protecting the revenue generated from these, streaming services is important. And there are, again, Darcy mentioned a lot of, compliance and a lot of piracy and also privacy related issues. So again, we have to keep in mind the best use cases or best, lessons learned from other services when there was a live sports, and try to take advantage of those when it comes to eSports as well.
Right. Hey, Magnus, instead of typing an answer to Chris's question, why don't you just open your mic and give us all your insight?
Yeah, I was about to type in an answer there, and I think definitely streaming will grow, but I doubt that this Olympic game in Tokyo will be the turning point where streaming will take precedence over the traditional broadcast. I think we'll a couple of years away from that before the networks are built out and the CDNs and then the whole infrastructure is built out for taking the whole load of traditional broadcast. But I think definitely we'll see a growth of streaming, but the Olympics in Tokyo will not be the breaking point where streaming is taking precedence over broadcast.
Okay, assuming the Tokyo is going to happen. I think everyone agrees that Tokyo will happen. I used to work at NBC Olympics, so I'm a little like I'm pro Olympics, or I'm optimistic. I think everyone knows they'll happen. I think we're now in the phase where it'll happen. It'll probably happen with like every 8th seat, even, I'm guessing. I think everyone agrees with that. But back to the OTTs. Can anyone share any experience? Jeff, maybe you could start. Anyone share any experience with how it's going with feeding these OTTs? Also interested in what mechanism people are using to hit the OTTs. They seem to be growing. They seem to be used to up the games between Twitch and the OTTs, which Cheddar would like to call post cable. Between the OTTs and Twitch, it seems like we are definitely upping the sports streaming game. Jeff, your thoughts about that?
My feelings on it are pretty simple. It's like, if you're not everywhere, then you're not anywhere. So you should, if you're trying to put your brand out there and trying to grow people, you have to make it as easy as possible to be able to get to them. So if you're exclusive in just one area and one streaming service or one CDN or just your website, you're leaving money on the table. You should be looking to every avenue possible to get your stream out there and to get your content seen.
Darcy, your thoughts about that? Especially OTTs, distribution, Twitch. I had mentioned, I don't want to give them a plug, but I had mentioned before I think we went live that I'm involved somehow. Let's just say we're involved with FCF football, and they've really, I can't believe I'm giving them a plug, but we'll use them as a case study. They've really upped the ante, upped the game by utilizing Twitch and enabling the fans to make decisions for that game. I mean, the fans are calling the plays. It's fascinating, terrific. They couldn't do that without Twitch and a true second screen experience. Darcy, you do a lot of that. Can you talk about distribution, OTT, how OTTs and maybe Twitch is helping up the game?
Yeah, look, you have to, as Jeff said, you have to be everywhere that you can, and the place you want to go and throw a net out to get the eyeballs are those public places like YouTube and Twitch and etc. So if you can get there, you should be there, and especially at the beginning. Problem with those places is they have restrictions. Twitch says you can't do a live production here, and then also have it over somewhere else. So it's contractually obligated, and most people don't know that, but those poor Twitch streamers have a rope around their neck when it comes to trying to go elsewhere. That said, they've created a place where billions of people aggregate, so why not? But you also have to think about your own distribution and your private kind of reach. And OTT is commodity. I mean, the tools, you can get them anywhere. I'm sorry to say that. I mean, we're an OTT provider. We have 1,200 customers on our what used to be their Frankly Media platform. It's mostly news distribution. So you have to actually have other tools and things to make it interesting. But just in general, I go with be as many places as you can out of the gate, and then try and refine what gets you the best return as you go. The first thing you have to get is eyeballs, and you're not going to build that day one on your own O&O unless you're starting as one of the people that somebody's bought your rights, and of course then you can sit back and collect the check. But in general, you mentioned earlier these amateur sports or smaller kind of things that would never see the light of day on a broadcast network. The 5,000, 10,000 subs is a nice number in this world. So just go out and find that magic number that gets you your content paid for, and then figure out what you do next. And if you want to go private or start going into your own kind of reach, then the tools are there. It's easy to embrace. They're all virtual. We've already talked about that. And, you pay by the usage, which is an awesome play. OTT is like the old web used to be. When I first went into web, it was, $1 million for a web page, and then Wix made it zero. And, that's kind of where the tools are right now. Of course, the production and everything still has to have that value. And that's where the layer you got to put on top of these systems and tools and outlets that you're going to use.
When you say you handle 1,200, I'm sorry, Ali, did you have something on that?
Yeah. I just want to second that what Darcy was saying, specifically OTT commodity. I like that phrase. I mean, OTT streaming has been along for a while, right? I mean, I hear what Magnus is saying in terms of maybe Tokyo is not the full transition from broadcast to streaming, but we have seen actually a streaming grow significantly in the sense that today setting up a new streaming channel is not hard. It's easy on the cloud platforms using all the the cloud-based encoders, AWS frameworks, and all the other vendors that offer even the CDNs and delivery to the consumers. It's really very straightforward to set up a cloud-based OTT streaming channel. And even better than that, you can protect it with DRM in 30 minutes. In 30 minutes, you can set up all the license rules that you want, how to actually protect that content going from your production all the way to the subscribers tuned to that channel. And so, yeah, I mean, that's the key. It's going to grow more, obviously. There are certain areas in the world that they're still relying on broadcast. But I think, again, for the most part, a lot of US and Europe have turned that point, and I think it's going to keep going that way. So that's what I kind of wanted to say, seconding Darcy's point.
Ali, while we're probably wrapping this up in a few minutes, and while your mic is open, I know you're a deep thinker, Ali. Anything else you want to discuss that's coming to mind that you want to discuss in here, especially experiences on how people are in fact upping their streaming game and leveling up the experience?
Yeah, so I just want to kind of enforce the fact in terms of finding the piracy on the web and stopping it. And I think Jeff brought it up again to get more details on that. So there are technologies that we call basically for web crawling and digital fingerprinting, where you're producing a content, even live content, you're actually generating a digital signature on the fly to know where this content is being licensed for. So when you find actually a content pirated on the web, you can actually understand easily from which licensee it was being leaked. So this is really important. That's what we call web monitoring or content monitoring on the web. That's really important for sports. It has been actually one of the requirements from some of the premium, soccer national leagues in Europe, in UK. Premier League has it as one of the requirements. So, and this can be extended to eSports as well. So that's one of the things that I wanted to highlight. And then the second phase is really about how you identify the subscriber. There are basically client-side specific watermarking solutions that are easy to integrate. Whatever target platform you have, whether it's a mobile device, a browser, you can easily add a plugin to put a watermark as the content is being consumed by the subscriber. And so having that level of additional protection on, right, would enable you to identify which of the subscribers are actually leaking that content. And that would solve some of the problem that Jeff is saying, that right away you see the content popping up in Russia, you can actually really identify if licensee it was, if it had that digital fingerprint generated during production. Right. So again, paying attention to these for the live streaming is actually one of the things that is going to enable protecting the revenue for all the streaming service providers, for all the eSports service providers. I hope that was just
take in. All right, there's a lot to take in, and I've got a page of notes here. There's so much that we could probably talk for 2 hours. But before I throw back to Eric from Streaming Media, let's go around the horn, and maybe some of you have a final thought. We'll go with Jeff, Darcy, then Magnus. Jeff, final thoughts?
I think that now that we've been through this pandemic, I really feel like that we are going to see more and more content out there just because people are going to be, they're starving for it. I know whenever I turn on the TV, the few times I do, I'm just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling because I can't find anything that I want to watch because I've watched it all. So I feel like that there is going to be a higher demand as we become a little bit back to normal of sorts. I think there's going to be such a high demand of content that those of us that are in this business are going to be pretty busy, to say the least.
Yep. Darcy?
Yeah, I think the genie's out of the bottle from last year, and I think the acceleration is, going to force everybody to finally, it's not a nice to have anymore. It's a must have to have streaming as part of your portfolio of things you do to distribute your content. Whether it's your only way or part of it, it's meaningful. And the last thing I'd say is your audience is changing. Wake up. The old guys like me aren't your audience. It's the people with the wallets that are playing games, don't care about what you're doing on broadcast, and need you to be in where they are and not where you think that you want them to be. So streaming is the means, and the live streaming, you got to get around it. And good news is there's lots of places to go for help. These kind of panels will help you, but even the folks on this panel, I'm sure would take an email or a call. Ask for help. There's lots of it out there. Lots of people that can help. It's a lot of competent people in this business now, not just a bunch of tech geeks like we were back in the day. It's serious business. Reach out. Don't be afraid to ask. Everybody's there to help.
Cool. Magnus, your thoughts?
I would be happy to help, and I think my final thought it's following up to what Darcy just said, is that I think we'll see that the same type of content will be leveraged in different formats, with highlight, with snaps, with Instagram feeds, with syndication of the same content moving to different platform, different formats, and different audience. So I saw that Discovery will do daily snaps from the Olympics to broadcast in Snapchat. So I think we're still more and more of using the same content feed, but in different formats, different platforms, different audience.
So much fun. I think everyone had their final thoughts. Eric, back to you at 428.
That was phenomenal. And I see some of our panelists are putting their emails in the chat. And so look for those if you can. If the rest of you would do that, if you're okay with doing that, that would be great. And I think Darcy's absolutely right that all of us in the industry from all aspects and all angles are always interested in helping. So that wraps things up. I'd like to thank once again Intertrust for sponsoring this panel, and Limelight Networks for sponsoring this whole week of panels and presentations. We will see you tomorrow for 2 more sessions, one on fast channels and one trying to predict what OTT is going to look like in 2025. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you tomorrow.